Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it. Aw, dang it. Aw, dang it.
About 83% of you guys are not subscribed. Subscribing, clicking that like button, and commenting all help me out a lot in doing what I really want to do. Thank you guys so much for all your support. What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing another Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile. I know it's been a while since I've done an in-person profile, but here I am bringing, finally it is together, Tearlament. It's Tearlament Lightsworn. I finally have all the cards to put it together, and I have optimized the list that I have built previously and shown on the channel before. I really like this deck. I think it's a lot of fun. It's probably the most fun that I've had recently with a deck, other than Orchest, of course. I think it's a lot of fun, and the lines on it are really, they're unintuitive, but they're a lot of fun to figure out. The entire point of the deck is to mill cards, and almost every single card in the deck will gain some sort of advantage off of getting milled or being milled, either by being in the graveyard and just fulfilling some sort of purpose by being in the graveyard, or by doing something explicitly when it's milled by a card. But I'm gonna stop yapping, and let's get to the profile. Starting out with our main deck, let's cover our Tearlament cards first. First, we are on triple copies of Tearlament Rhinoheart. On normal or special, we can send a Tearlament monster from deck to graveyard for effect. And then if Tearlament Rhinoheart is sent to the graveyard for a card effect, we can send one Tearlament, we can special summon it from our graveyard, and then send one Tearlament card from our hand to the graveyard. Keep in mind, almost all of our Tearlaments, if we send a card to graveyard, it's going to be for card effect, not for cost. So it's going to trigger all of our Tearlament cards, getting us more advantage that way. If we do special summon it from the graveyard using that effect, though, it is banished when it leaves the field, which is a little bit unfortunate. However, we do have cards in order to get it back. Our next three of is going to be 3 Tearlament Kashtira. Unfortunately, this one is a little bit pricey, which makes the deck quite expensive. I believe it's around $20 a copy as of time of recording. But Tearlament Kashtira is quite good. It's a card that can special summon itself from your hand by banishing a Tearlament card. Special summon itself from hand, and then for effect, you have to banish a Tearlament card from your hand or your graveyard. And then on summon, you can choose to mill 3 cards, or have your opponent mill 3 cards. And if Tearlament Kashtira is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, we can mill 2 cards off the top of our deck. Really good. That special summon is a quick effect, so we can special summon it on a quickie, which is great for getting instant speed mills on your opponent's turn to potentially find interaction. Tearlament Kashtira is really important, and the ability of it just being able to be a body as well as milling cards means we kind of do have to play it at 3, unfortunately. Especially given that we have such a low amount of actual Tearlament names in the deck. We are playing the max amount of the other Tearlaments that we can. We're playing 1 Tearlament Shiren, 1 Tearlament Merly, and 1 Tearlament Havness. All 3 of these Tearlaments have the effect where if they're sent to the graveyard by a card effect, we can fusion summon using these cards, as well as cards from our hand, field, and graveyard as material by putting them back to the bottom of our deck. Keep in mind, Bestials do negate them since they have to put themselves to the bottom of the deck. However, it is a great tool for this deck in order to use resources from our graveyard in order to get even more advantage. Which means even if we mill something like a Havness early on, if we don't have anything to fuse, it's worth it to hold it in the graveyard because the likelihood that we mill another one is pretty high. So we're going to mill another one, and then we can actually start doing stuff with the cards. But that's going to be it for our Tearlament main deck monsters. We're not playing too many, however, we're playing the max amount we really can. Next, we are on a triple Primeval Planet Perliano. This card is quite cheap now, which is very excellent. This card on activation will add a Tearlament from deck to hand, and fusions and Tearlaments we control gain 500 attack. And then if I believe it says if a Tearlament in our graveyard is shuffled into the deck, we get a pop-up card on field, which is quite good as making our Tearlaments actually, like the shuffling into deck effect, function as interaction points. Next, we are on triple Tearlament Sulliek. If we control a Tearlament or a Vsauce, we can activate the effect, or we can target a card on the field, negate its effects, and if we do, we have to send a monster we control or in our hand to the graveyard. Frequently, it's going to be a Tearlament, and since that sends for effect, it's going to trigger that Tearlament, which makes it less of a cost and more of a beneficial thing to be sending that Tearlament away. And then if Sulliek is sent to the graveyard, we get to add a Tearlament monster from deck to hand, which is why we're playing 3 of it, So if we mill it, it just translates into a Rhoda for any Tearlament monster, which is really great. Next, we're on a card that most Tearlament players don't play or didn't play back in the day. We are on double Tearlament Grief. This is a card that mentions Vsauce Starfrost that special summons a Tearlament from your deck, and then you have to send a card with the same type attribute combination from your field to the graveyard. This allows basically to Foolish Burial any Tearlament from your deck on activation, just turning this into a graveyard fusion card functionally. We're playing Trivic Karma. You'll see it in just a little bit, but since it mentions Vsauce, we can search this card off of Trivic Karma. This also allows us to add back Banished Traps if it's milled to the graveyard or sent to the graveyard by a card effect, which can come up if we do Banished Traps, like for example with Tearlament Kashtira. So we can kind of plan a little bit ahead with our Tearlament Kashtira in order to get back resources with Tearlament Grief. And that's why we're playing two, because even if we mill one, we're probably going to have another one in deck. Next, we are only on 2 Tearlament Scream. I know prior lists used to play 3, but we're not playing enough Tearlaments in order to justify 3. And we're not playing enough Tearlament Traps in order to justify milling so many. We're only on 4 Tearlament Traps, so we only really want to be searching like one of them if we don't open it. So the likelihood that we draw the trap is a lot higher than you might think it is. So Scream isn't actually as useful as it might seem. If you do ever want to see it, again, you can always grab it with Trivic Karma, because all of our Tearlament cards mention Vsauce Starfrost, so all these cards are very searchable, especially if we can get Trivic Karma in graveyard. Speaking of the devil, here is Trivic Karma. On-field effect, pretty much irrelevant. We're never really going to end with a Vsauce Starfrost on field unless we just end with a Rhino Heart there. However, it is a graveyard effect where we can banish it to add a card that mentions Vsauce Starfrost from our deck to our hand. Since it's a trap, we can use that at instant speed, so we can play around stuff like Droll, as well as the card's just crazy. We can add any of our Tearlament cards. That's pretty much what it says. Add any Tearlament spell trap from your deck to your hand, which is great. It also adds our field spell, which is also really great. And then lastly, we're on 1 Tearlament Meta Noise. Meta Noise, when sent to the graveyard, lets you add a Tearlament monster from your graveyard to your hand. Great way to add back Tearlament Kashtiras from your graveyard, since they can't really be used as fusion material for much of anything. So you can add them back to hand to have extra points of interaction. But that's going to be about it for the Tearlament portion of the deck. I believe it's about 21 cards. But next, let us walk through the Lightsworn portion. First off, we are on triple Baby Dragon of Lightsworn. If you have a Lightsworn card in your graveyard, you can special summon it from your hand. On special summon, we can send a Lightsworn card from deck to graveyard. Really great for just finding whatever you need. If you need a tuner extender, which is very necessary for this deck, you can grab that. If we want to have that trap card, Lightsworn Aegis, in order to have protection against evenly matched and stuff like that, we can grab that instead if we already have access to a tuner like Fellis. This card is so very flexible, and if it's sent to the graveyard by any means, you get to add a Judgment Dragon or a Punishment Dragon from deck to hand. I know it doesn't say Judgment Dragon or Punishment Dragon, but it's Judgment Dragon or Punishment Dragon. Unfortunately, I don't want to spend $30 on Punishment Dragon for an individual card. So we're mostly just using Judgment Dragon as a level and a free body, and you'll see why in just a little bit. Next, we're on triple Weiss Lightsworn Archfiend. This is one of the new additions, as well as the Baby Dragon to the Lightsworn archetype. This means you brick on your wolves way less. If you see wolf and Weiss, that wolf is no longer a brick. It is now pure plus. Weiss has the effect in hand where you can put a different Lightsworn card from your hand to the top of the deck, special summon Weiss, and then you get to mill 2 cards, I believe. Yeah, so then you can mill 2 cards, and then if Weiss itself is sent to the graveyard, we can target one other Lightsworn in our graveyard and special summon it. Unfortunately, those are both once per turns, unlike Wolf. However, Weiss is just crazy. It's also a level 4 tuner. That's very important. We're only running 1 synchro in this deck, but the fact that we need a 4 tuner and a 4 non-tuner is critical, and we really want to be getting access to that synchro. I've already said his name, you know him, you love him. Triple Wolf! We love seeing him in our hands. Woohoo! Wolf is good. If it's sent to graveyard, it immediately special summons itself from graveyard. It's always going to be Chainlink 1 or Chainlink 2 if you have like mill multiple. It's not optional. You have to Wolf, which is a little bit of the downside of this deck. Your zones will get clogged if you are not playing optimally. If you're not prepared for what you're doing, your combo, your zones are going to get clogged if you're too lucky. You can get too lucky with this deck, unfortunately. But that's it for like the 3 of Lightsworns. Now let's just cover our 1-ofs real quick. We're on Fellas, Lightsworn, Archer. We can send this off of the baby dragon, and then Fellas says when it's sent to graveyard by a monster effect, we can special summon it from our graveyard. Please do keep that in mind. It doesn't trigger if it's sent off of like Tearlament Scream. It doesn't trigger if it's sent off of the Lightsworn spell, which I'm going to mention in a little bit. But it is a 4 tuner. And the whole point of this is we want to send this with the baby dragon, special summon the Fellas, and that's an 8 synchro right there. It has an on-field effect where you contribute it to pop a card on field. Pretty interesting. Not super relevant for the combo itself, but it can come up. But it's just here for a free 4 tuner extender that you can turn. It turns the baby dragon into a combo starter. And then our last 2 actual Lightsworns, we're playing 1 Lumina Lightsworn Summoner. We're playing the old one, so it technically sends for effect. Just joking. Please use proper card text, of course. They're mostly here for extenders, link fodder, and we just want to make sure we have more Lightsworn names in the deck so we can get that Lightsworn Baby Dragon effect if we get that free special summon. And then lastly, we're on 1 Raiden. Raiden actually does come up, funny enough. A lot of the times we play Cross Sheep, we make Cross Sheep is very critical for our basic combo. And when we summon a fusion monster to zone Cross Sheep points to, we can special summon Raiden from our graveyard to get some extra mills. And it's a 4 and it's a tuner, so we can kind of fulfill everything we could ever want. So I like Raiden a lot, and I think he is a cool guy. And then, of course, the Judgment Dragon I mentioned. If you have 4 more Lightsworns in your graveyard with different names, you can special summon it, and on field you can pay 1,000 life points ignition effect to destroy everything. Everything except for Judgment Dragon. Back row, monsters, everything. Judgment Dragon is actually really good in this deck because it triggers your Tearlaments. It triggers every Tearlament card. Your spells, your traps, your monsters, triggers everything. Which is great because when you wipe the board and you're just left with the Judgment Dragon, you have 3k to pressure, yeah, but that's not 8k. But if you have Tearlaments on field, then they can get you the rest of the way to get you to that OTK. Next, we are on a triple charge of the Light Brigade, probably the best individual Lightsworn card in the entire game. For cost, we can send the top 3 cards of our deck to the graveyard and then add 1 level 4 or lower Lightsworn monster from our deck to our hand. That isn't a once per turn. It sends from the top of the graveyard to cost, unfortunately, so it doesn't trigger any of our Tearlament cards. Keep that in mind. This won't trigger our tiers. However, we are still playing it, and we are still playing it at 3 copies because we do need to get cards in graveyard. It's not like milling the cards to get their effects. We need the cards in graveyard, period. We need Lightsworns in graveyard for Lightsworn Dragonling. We need Tearlaments or other cards in the graveyard for our Tearlaments to actually function. Because they nerf Tearlaments to a degree where they do not function by themselves. We need supplementary cards in the graveyard and other zones in order to actually let the Tearlaments function. And the Lightsworns ideally are supposed to allow that to happen by loading up the graveyard for us. And then our last Lightsworn card is Lightsworn Aegis. If it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, reset it. Great. And then it's a trap card where we can flip it up, negate face-up cards on the field equal to the number of less than or equal to the number of Lightsworn cards we control. I think it's monsters. Let me double check. Yeah, so it's going to be Lightsworn monsters, but it negates face-up cards, which is great. It negates Dark Ruler, negates Evenly Matched. Doesn't negate Saber Poly, unfortunately, but it is a great card if you are very cautious about interruption or board breaking potential of your opponent. And then our last 2 cards in the deck, we are of course on double King of the Swamp. The King! This card is not that great. I'm going to be honest. It isn't that great. We do need to play it though, because it lets us actually make stuff with our Tearlaments that is threatening. Because we don't have Tearlament Kit Close, we need to have Tearlament Kit Close. That is not good in order to make any sort of decent board somewhat. But yeah, so that's the deck. That's the whole main deck, and now let's go to the extra deck, and then unfortunately I can't show you a basic combo because the deck is completely non-linear after the initial thing, but I can show you what the initial setup would look like. But first, let us go to our extra deck. First off, the most important card, the one I was alluding to the entire time, Chaos Dragon 2. We're looking at Minerva, the Athenian Lightsworn. It has the effect where Lightsworns can't be banished by card effects. Funny little weird counter to SP Little Knight. It's kind of goofy and funny, but that's all cool. On summon, we can send Lightsworns up to the number of Lightsworns used as this card's material with different types. Meaning we can, like, for example, we could send something like a wolf plus a Weiss, but we cannot go wolf plus Fellis because wolf and Fellis are both beast warriors. So they have to be the different subtypes. So we can't, like, you know, send double extenders like that. Although we can send double extenders because Weiss is also an extender. The Minerva also has the effect, ignition effect on field. We can banish up to 4 Lightsworns from our graveyard, mill that many cards from the top of our deck. Which turns this into a mill 4, which is why I call it Baby Chaos Ruler. Because on summon, it gives you 2 extenders pretty much, and then on ignition, you get a mill 4, which is great. It's also an 8, so keep that in mind for a little bit. So we are on the 1 Minerva. For links, that's our only synchro, by the way. On links, we're on 1 Cross Sheep. If if a monster is special summoned to a zone it points to, and it's pointing to a fusion monster, we can special summon a level 4 or lower monster from our graveyard. It doesn't negate its effects, which is how we're going to be getting that Raiden back, as well as we can grab stuff like Rhino Heart back too, if we didn't want to recur it earlier. We're on 1 IP Masquerena, however, this probably should be an SP Little Knight, but it's going to be completely up to your discretion. I'm just going to keep it an IP for the time being. We are on 1 Sprite Sprind. This is here to send Tearlament Merly. It also is interaction on its own if you have an Xyz monster, which is really great. And then our last extra deck card, we are on 1 Apollosa Bow of the Goddess. We can put a lot of like random bodies on board, so being able to translate those random bodies into actual interaction against our opponent is quite good, even if Apo isn't necessarily long for this world. So those are our links. Small link package, we're only on 4 of them things, but that does mean we have a very large toolbox to work with when we're actually playing our deck. For Xyz, we are on 1 Minerva Exalted Lightsworn. They're playing the old Minerva, yes. We can detach it and we get a mill 3, and if we mill any Lightsworn cards by that effect, we get to draw cards equal to the number of Lightsworns milled. Really funny. If we do manage to mill a Lightsworn, which typically aren't the best mills, we want to be milling the Tearlament cards mostly, it does give us a little bit of a buyback, for example, where we can get that draw and potentially find a Tearlament for a Lightsworn card. And then if our opponent chooses to pop Minerva, we also get to mill another 3. Keep in mind, this is a Lightsworn that we can end on for Lightsworn Aegis. Because one of the issues with Aegis is that we don't really have any good Lightsworns we want to end on, but since this Minerva floats, it isn't the worst to end on, especially since Sprite Sprind can turn it into interaction. We are on Abyss Dweller as a 4 for interaction as well. We're on Tearlament, Rhino Heart, which can actually provide a buff for Dweller since it's a water. And then we are also on 1 Time Thief Redoer because it detaches for effect the materials. So we'll trigger our Shiren and our Rhino Heart if they're underneath of it. And it can steal our opponent's cards. And then our last Xyz is the one that I've been alluding to the entire time, the Zombie Vampire. It is an extender. It mills 4 cards from the top of both players' deck, sure, but then we can special summon a monster from either player's graveyard, which is great for getting to Apollosa or Sprite Sprind. It's a card that we can end on to turn Sprind into interaction since it's an Xyz, and it's just a big bungus. It's a 3k 2800, However, the main thing is we use Judgment Dragon and Minerva to make this to mill 4 more. So basically our Minerva combo will mill 2 Lightsworns, 4 random cards, and then 4 more random cards with the Zombie Vampire. So we're functionally milling 10 with our basic Minerva combo, which is not the worst thing in the world to be doing. But we are, of course, playing a fusion deck. So what's a fusion deck without fusion monsters? We are on 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp. This one we can use like the Zombie Vampire and any of our Tearlaments in order to go into it. Please do keep in mind, the one downside of the Lightsworns is they're light. They're light, so there actually isn't too much we can really fuse them into using the Tearlaments that's really worth it. So that means our Lightsworns in Graveyard are kind of functionless outside of Dragonling or Weiss Fuel. Or Athena Fuel, of course. So they're not functionless, but they have no function in regards to the Tearlaments other than, like, you know, there's just the milling, or wanting to be milled, and as well as the Tearlaments wanting to be milled. We are on 1 Garura. This is just a card that we can, like, you know, put back extra Tearlaments in our graveyard in order to draw cards, so not the worst. We are on 1 Predaplant Dragostapelia. We want to be using one of these cards as material for this. Almost forgot to mention, Mud Dragon's a 4. Keep that in mind. Well, I mean, you don't have to keep that in mind. You already saw all our 4s. It's also a water, can make Abyss Dweller strong. But these are also fusions that we want to be putting back from graveyard to our extra deck to make Dragostapelia, which is really good interaction. Being able to change levels and negate effects is really great, especially on instant speed. And then lastly, our final 3 fusion monsters. We are on 1 Tearlament Kaleido Heart, 1 Tearlament Rulkalos, and 1 Rafa Dragon Overlord of the Dark World. First, let's start with Kaleido Heart. On summon, we can on summon, or if I believe Aqua is sent to the graveyard. Yeah, if an Aqua is sent to the graveyard or this card is special summoned, we get to spin a card from deck from field back into deck. And then if a Kaleido Heart leaves the field because of a card effect, we can send 1 Tearlament card from our deck to our graveyard and then special summon Kaleido Heart, which will then trigger its first effect to spin another card. However, they're both once per turn, so we can't, you know, infinite loop that thing. But being able to send any Tearlament card means that isn't a cost, and sending it to the graveyard is a good thing that we want to be doing. So yeah, Kaleido Heart is crazy, and one of the best setups this deck can really produce is Sulliek plus Rhino Heart, because it's a monster negate, and then Rhino Heart gets to send another card, and then special, which spins a card, and then we get to send like a Tearlament, like Merly or something, and then we get to fuse, and then if we didn't spin a card on summon, the Merly being sent to the graveyard is going to allow us to spin a card. So it's just kind of an infinite resource loop of advantage as long as we can get that ball rolling. Rulkalos, if your opponent would activate an effect to special summon a monster, we can basically negate it, and then if it's sent to the by sending a card to the graveyard, and if Rulkalos is sent to the graveyard, we can special summon it from our graveyard. And then lastly, we are on Grafa, Dragon Overlord of the Dark World. These two we have to use King of the Swamp to summon. That's why we're playing it, to make these 2 monsters. Either one or the other. If we have cards in hand, Dragon Overlord's a little bit better. But if we're afraid of like stuff like Nibiru, Rulkalos is pretty damn decent. Grafa is basically just a negate. If your opponent would activate a spell, trap, or monster effect, we can change the effect into them making us discard a card, which can trigger our Tearlament cards. Since we're not playing Dark World, we don't get the full advantage of, like, you know, I'm going to kill you if you make me discard a card now. But it's still a damn decent card. A negate's a negate. Like, no matter what universe you are in, being able to negate and evenly matched is pretty good. But yeah, that's about it for the extra, and then I'm just going to walk you through that basic combo of ours. Alrighty, so for this basic combo, we need just Dragonling like a Lightsworn in Graveyard. If we have a Lightsworn in Grave, we can special that Dragonling. We can go Dragonling effect, send Felis. Felis will then trigger, special summoning itself. Then we can sync these 2 away since it's a 4 tuner and a 4 non-tuner. We can then go Minerva. We can go Chainlink 1 Minerva in order to mill 2, and then Chainlink 2 Dragonling in order to chain block the Minerva from being ashed or something. to add our Judgment Dragon from deck to hand, and then Minerva's can mill 2, milling a Weiss and then a Wolf. Then we can go Wolf Chainlink 1, a mandatory, and then Chainlink 2, we can go something like Fellas. We can then special summon that Fellas, special summon that Wolf, and then now if we want, we can go into a rank 4 of our choosing, or we can go into a Cross Sheep. And keep in mind, we only have 3 Lightsworns engraved, so we do want to get one of these off field, so we can use that Minerva effect to mill 4. Before we use that effect to mill 4, we do want to special this Judgment Dragon. So now you see what I mean, where it's like we have a lot of decisions to make, and we have to make each decision before we move to a next step, which all the decisions can be very variable depending on what you actually mill. So I think this deck is a lot of fun. It like makes me think. Which is something I won't say for every Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Not every Yu-Gi-Oh deck makes me think, but this one makes me think and makes my brain tingle in a good way. But that's about it for the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you all next time. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or 2 before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.